Don't come close to my son anymore. Please, please stay away from him. He is now the king.
My child, I beg you in God's name, leave the prince and marry another man. He is wasting your time, my child.
You must leave now. My son the king cannot marry a commoner. We have a maiden for him now.
The sun stood high over Umuofia that day, and the whole village had gathered in the great square before the Igwe's palace. Drums rolling like distant thunder, dancers stamping dust into the golden light. It was the day their new king, crowned only a moon before after his father joined the ancestors, would choose the woman who would sit beside him as queen. Ola stood among the maidens near the front, her wrapper freshly dyed with uli patterns her mother had taught her before she passed, her heart beating with a quiet, hopeful joy. For 6 years she had walked beside this man, first as a palace maid assigned to the young prince, then as something more, something the whole village had watched grow between them. When the sickness came upon him 2 years ago, the one the healers whispered might carry him to the ancestors before his time, it was Ola who did not leave his bedside. She fed him with her own hands when his arms grew too weak to lift a spoon. She sang to him through fevered nights, when even his own mother had begun preparing herself for mourning. The village had watched her spend her youth like water poured out for a wilting plant, and everyone believed that when the crown finally sat on his head, Ola's would be the hand he reached for. The elders sat in a semicircle of carved stools, the Onowu, the prime minister, proud among them, his daughter Adaeze seated close by in beads and coral that caught the sun like fire. She was beautiful, no one denied that, but the kind of beauty born of oil and leisure, a beauty that had never known a sick man's bedside or a mourning hut. The king rose. The square fell silent but for the distant cry of a hawk overhead. "My people," he began, his voice carrying the practiced weight of new authority. "A king does not choose a queen with his heart alone. He must choose with his eyes upon the kingdom's future, with beauty, with class, with the blood that will strengthen his throne." He turned, and his gaze passed over Ola as though she were a stranger, landing instead on Adaeze. "I have chosen the Onowu's daughter. She carries herself as a queen should. She will sit beside me." A murmur broke across the square like a wave striking rock. Ola's knees weakened beneath her, though she did not fall. Then Lolo, the king's mother, rose from her stool, her voice sharp enough to cut through the crowd's confusion. "Ola," she said, loud enough for every ear to catch, "you have served this palace well, and the palace will reward you. Cloth, yam, whatever you need. But do not mistake service for worth. You are a commoner, a low-born girl. You were never going to wear a queen's beads. Did you truly believe otherwise?" Ola stood frozen, tears sliding freely down her face now, though she made no sound. She thought of her father, who on his dying mat had begged her to leave the sick prince and marry a healthy man who could give her children and peace. And she had refused, choosing loyalty over his warning. She thought of her mother, a year later, who whispered the same plea with her last breath, and still Ola had stayed, believing love and devotion would be enough. Now, standing in the square with the whole village's eyes upon her shame, she understood, all at once and too late, that 6 years of her life had been spent building a house on sand. "Ola," Lola said again, waving a dismissive hand. "You may leave now. Do not spoil the people's celebration with your face." And so Ola turned, her legs like borrowed things beneath her, and began the long, heavy walk out of the square, past the drums that would not stop for her grief, past the dancers who barely paused, past Adaeze, who allowed herself just for a moment, a small and satisfied smile. That night was pale, as though it too mourned for Ola. She sat on the mud floor of her hut, her wrapper soaked from tears she could no longer count, when a shadow darkened her doorway. It was Lolo, the king's mother, her presence heavy with perfume and pride. "Ola," she said, not bothering to sit, "my son sent me. He said his heart still longs for you in the night. He said you should keep your body ready for him." The palace will not let you starve. We will send yam, cloth, even cowries, whenever he calls for you. Ola lifted her swollen eyes slowly. The words struck harder than the rejection at the palace that morning. She had been cast aside as a wife, yet summoned still as a secret. She said nothing. There was nothing left in her chest, but a hollow, aching silence. Lolo clicked her tongue at the girl's stillness and left as she came, without looking back. The market women were the first to sharpen their tongues. Did you hear? The one who nursed a sick prince back to strength? And this is her reward, cast off like chaff. Some laughed behind their palm oil-stained hands. Others shook their heads in mock pity, the kind that stings worse than laughter. Ola walked through the market with her basket half empty, her spirit emptier still, pretending she could not hear the whispers chasing her like flies over a wound. At night, alone, she would press her palm against her chest just to feel that her heart still beat, because everything else about her felt already buried. The king came in the deep hours when the compound slept, wrapped in a dark cloth, so the guards would not know their Igwe walked like a thief to a widow's hut. He stood at Ola's door and called her name softly, the way he used to when they were only a sick man and a devoted girl, not yet king and stranger. Ola, open for me. No, Igwe, she answered, her voice steady though her hands shook. You gave your throne to another woman's daughter. You cannot give me your shadow. He came 3 more nights that moon, and 3 more times she refused him, until his calling turned from tenderness to a low, dangerous anger she had never heard from him before. Word reached the village that a traitor prince from Umuofia, a man named Okorie, had seen Ola at a distant market. Within 2 moons, his people arrived at what remained of her father's compound with kola nut and palm wine, asking for her hand. For the first time since the crowning, something warm moved in Ola's chest. Perhaps the gods had not forgotten her after all. But before Okorie's people could finish their kola, palace messengers arrived, sent by the king himself. The Igwe says no man in this village or beyond may marry Ola. She belongs to the palace's memory. Let no one touch what is not theirs to touch. Okorie's elders, fearing the wrath of a throne, quietly withdrew their kola nut and their offer, and left before nightfall. Ola stood in her doorway and watched her one chance at a new life ride away on the back of a stranger's horse, dust rising like smoke from a fire she never got to warm herself by. Lolo returned once more, this time with less patience. Foolish girl, you refuse my son's bed, you let a suitor come and think you free, and now you stand alone with nothing. Bow to what you are. Take what is offered before it is taken away. I would rather have nothing, Lolo, Ola said quietly, than be something's shadow forever. Lolo's eyes narrowed to slits. You will regret this pride, Ola, mark my words. From that day small cruelties began to visit Ola like biting ants. Her goats were found dead in their pen one morning, throats slit in the dark. Her hut's roof, newly thatched, caught fire from an accident no one witnessed. Yams she had stored for the dry season vanished overnight, only to be found, planted, some whispered, by unseen hands, hidden inside her own barn, so that the village had accused her of hoarding from the communal store.